Scrutiny Select Committee. For the benefit of those watching on the YouTube channel, members of the committee are present in the chamber, and these members will be voting on the proposals this evening. Other members of the council are also in attendance and/or participating via MS Teams, and they can take part in any discussions. They can ask questions, but will be not allowed to vote. Your attention is drawn to agenda item 1, which sets out the guidelines on how meetings will be conducted, including the ground rules. Before we start with the formal business, we will confirm attendance of voting members by doing a roll call, and I will ask Victoria, a Democratic Services Officer, to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor King.
Present.
Councillor Bell.
Present.
Councillor Bridge.
Present.
Councillor Dalton.
Present.
Councillor Davis.
Present.
Councillor Hickmott.
Present.
Councillor Hood.
Present.
Councillor Oliver. Councillor Palmer.
Present.
Councillor Roud.
Present.
Councillor Tanner.
Present.
Councillor Thornywell.
Present.
And Councillor Williams.
Present.
Thank you, Victoria. I'm now going to ask the officers present in the chamber and online to introduce themselves. I'll start with you, Damien.
Thank you, Chair. Damien Roberts, Chief Executive of the Council.
Good evening, Eleanor Hoyle, Director of Planning, Housing and Environmental Health.
Good evening, members. James Bailey, Head of Planning.
Good evening, members. Kelly Sharp, Planning Policy Manager.
Good evening, members. Bartholomew Wren, Principal Planning Officer.
We have Jenny online, I believe.
Hi, I'm Jenny Knowles. I'm the Planning Policy Team Leader.
Thank you. Victoria, do we have any apologies for absence, please?
No, jeez.
I assume, therefore, we have no substitute members.
No substitutes.
Do we have any declarations of interest, either in advance or in the chamber? Okay, so that's a nil return. I ask you to agree the minutes of the meeting held on 15th of July 2025 as a correct record of those proceedings. Can I take that? Thank you so much. Right, as we're moving swiftly on, we come to item 6 on the agenda, which is a report which seeks approval of the Tunbridge and Morling Regulation 18 local plan document to be published for consultation. Once we agree if we agree, the consultation will run, or is planned to run for the statutory required 6-week period between Monday, the 10th of November and Monday, the 22nd of December, 2025. I'm now going to move to ask Kelly to give a presentation on the background to the recommendation, and then we will move on from there. Thank you. Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. Okay. The main focus of this evening's committee is a recommendation to Cabinet to approve the Regulation 18 Tunbridge and Morling Local Plan to go out to public consultation alongside other documents, including the Active Travel Strategy and also the Interim Sustainability Appraisal. If the local plan is approved for consultation, then the consultation is proposed to run for 6 weeks. This will allow our local communities and stakeholders to take part in the consultation and share their views on our emerging local plan before the plan is finalised for its last consultation in summer next year and before submitting the local plan to the Planning Inspectorate for examination by December 2026. Members will be aware that this is our second Regulation 18 consultation. The first was held in 2022. However, since this time, a revised NPPF has been published, which has resulted in a delay to our plan making process so that we can account for national planning policy changes. Members will be aware from previous committees of the key implications of these national policy changes, which include a requirement to meet a much increased housing need figure, as well as a weakening of Greenbelt policy and the introduction of Greybelt. These implications have meant that we've had to take a different approach to meeting the government's housing target than that to which we were progressing previously under the old MPPF. In relation to the local plan itself, the local plan looks ahead to 2042 to ensure that we meet the requirement for a 15-year plan period on adoption. Once adopted, the local plan will provide a range of planning policies to help guide development in the borough, ensuring that the needs and priorities are met. The plan itself is structured around a number of key themes, including climate change, the natural environment, the historic environment, design, housing, the economy, rural development and infrastructure. And we've met with members to shape policies in these key areas. The plan also puts forward draft proposed housing and employment allocations to meet the borough's needs. One of the key areas for any local plan is the requirement to meet the government's objectively assessed needs for housing and other uses. Our housing need is to deliver 1,097 homes per year. And for an 18-year plan period, from 2024 to 2042, our minimum housing requirement is to deliver 19,746 homes. Given existing commitments and a windfall allowance, this means that we're required to find land to deliver 12,592 homes. We've also been advised to provide a buffer to account for the non-delivery of sites throughout the plan period if this were to occur. And so the overall plan allocates land to deliver 12,664 homes, providing a surplus of only 72 dwellings. We're also required to meet our employment need, as well as provide pitches for our gypsy and traveller communities. At a minimum, we're required to deliver 361,500 square metres of employment space and provide an additional 33 pitches for our gypsy and travellers. With the release of land in the Greenbelt, we consider that we'll be able to meet our housing, employment and also pitch needs. Chapter 5 of the local plan sets out the spatial strategy. This is an important section of the plan as it provides the overarching framework for the distribution of development for the plan period. In summary, the spatial strategy seeks to deliver patterns of sustainable growth, allocating growth in and around our most sustainable towns and villages, where communities will have access to a wide range of services and facilities, and also sustainable transport options to larger settlements. In addition, the plan also sets out that we will support appropriate growth in our rural areas also. The spatial strategy also seeks to protect national landscapes and the Greenbelt as far as possible, bearing in mind the new government policy towards Greenbelt and Greybelt. Key to the spatial strategy is ensuring that infrastructure is delivered to support both new and existing communities, and further detail in relation to the work that we've undertaken so far with infrastructure providers is provided in our interim infrastructure delivery plan. It's important to note, though, that this document is a live document and it will be progressed further throughout the plan making process. Annex 2 of the committee report sets out the proposed allocated housing and employment growth by settlement to 2042. And Chapter 14 of the local plan itself includes the draft proposed allocations. Over the past 12 months, we've undertaken much work on our evidence base to inform the local plan, and Annex 3 provides a list of the documents that will be available for the consultation. The majority of this evidence is already published on our website. As with any plan at Regulation 18 stage, this is not the final plan. The plan that we've progressed is a plan that we are seeking member approval to go out to public consultation. Following a public consultation, we'll need to consider the responses that we receive, as well as further test the spatial strategy, the sites included within the plan, as well as update and progress policies. We'll also need to progress further evidence, including more detailed transport modelling, as well as consider other infrastructure requirements. And we've set out a series of next steps at in the committee report at 6.26. In terms of the consultation, paragraph 6.21 and 6.25 of the committee report, We've detailed the engagement methods that we intend to use for consultation. This includes holding drop-in sessions for the public and stakeholders, a virtual exhibition, utilising digital consultation platforms and maps, as well as delivering a leaflet to every household in the borough to inform and invite people to take part in the consultation. Within the committee report at section 9 and section 11, we've set out the benefits to the council of progressing a local plan, as well as the risks of not progressing a local plan, and we would like to draw members' attention to this. The alternative of not having a plan in place would result in planning by appeal, ad hoc and uncoordinated growth, which will not be supported by the strategic infrastructure that we require. It's also likely that the government will step in using their intervention powers given the housing and economic agenda. We've provided an updated risk register at Annex 5. In addition to asking approval to go out to consultation on the local plan, we've also made small amendments to the local development scheme. A track change version is provided at Annex 4. The local development scheme sets out the council's timetable for the local plan, and we've updated the timetable to align with the proposed consultation dates, that being Q3 of the year 25-26 now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kelly. There will be plenty of opportunity to raise questions with Kelly and any of the other officers that are here to support her. But before I do that, I'm going to give Councillor Taylor the opportunity to say a few words. He is the Cabinet Member for Planning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I will be very brief and brutal. Matt appointed me 2 years ago as Cabinet Member for Planning, and I've promised every day since then that this plan will be fair and equitable and it will follow the evidence. And thanks to the officers, that is the case. I'm happy to put my name to this draft. The time to argue about the detail of this draft is during the consultation process. It is very, very important that we get this put forward for consultation tonight. So I know how you feel about this plan. I feel just the same about it, believe me. Let's face it, Borough Green Garden City is top of the list. So let's move this forward to consultation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I commend a lot of the points you've made there. I'd just like to make a couple of points of my own, if you don't mind. I would like, I think members already appreciate the hard work and professionalism of our officers and the scale of the task that they have achieved to prepare the local plan and to provide the massive amount of information to support it. I can't really overemphasize the word massive. The challenge has been heightened by the tight timescales placed on us and them by the government to submit a plan to the inspectorate by December next year, and with all the potential consequences if we don't do so. The plan before you reflects the increased housing targets placed on us by the government. We've seen the housing targets from TNBC increase by 29% over previous targets, and a threat of a further 20% if we don't meet the government's requirements. I think members will appreciate that given the timescales we are compelled to work to, and there's been limited time for members to absorb the incredible amount of material provided for the committee, as well as the multitude of links to many reference documents. And none of us are, in actual fact, planning experts, but we're having to move in that direction. I am minded to support a decision tonight to move to a public consultation of the local plan. But if you don't mind, I would like to record that this does not automatically represent my agreement with the strategy laid out in the plan or every aspect of the evidence. But that is what the consultation will be about. For example, I'd like to record some incredulity that in stage 2 of the Greenbelt report, table 7, in fact, it states that 136 of the subplots of the Greenbelt that were assessed, 134 of the sites, all but 2, are provisionally designated as Greybelt. That means they're suddenly not considered to be good Greenbelt sites and are simply being reclassified as Greybelt to meet the government's criteria for development. It does seem strange to me that these sites have easily met all of the criteria laid down for good Greenbelt over the last 50 years, and we're moving into a different age. And I'm sure that many of you will recall that our recently departed Secretary of State telling us that the Greenbelt was safe in her hands. In my opinion, the scale of the planned growth in the town and the villages across Tunbridge and Malling will be dramatic during this planned period. This is also happening in nearby districts that make demands on our services in Tunbridge and Malling for travel, retail, parking and schools, etc. The net effect on our roads and services will be increasingly difficult to mitigate, with the risk of overcrowding due to lack of infrastructure and inadequate capacity. The main methodology that is used to select sites for inclusion in the local plan is primarily called a call for site system. This means we're largely limited, as are the officers, who naturally have, by people who naturally have a vested interest in offering land up for development. So the strategy we have is principally to make the best of those sites and expand existing settlements to share the pain. It is difficult to see this as part of a proactive master plan, I must admit. I also question the actual premise for the housing targets themselves. We are working we're actually working to in this local plan. To me, they do represent a political construct which represents our objectively assessed needs. The increased targets we're now working with have been illogically applied to different councils across the country. And in my opinion, these targets are magnified by the housing numbers being exported to the home counties as a result of London's disinclination to meet our housing need. This government has removed the urban uplift in favour of Greybelt, thereby simply transferring houses that should be built in cities to protected landscapes such as ours, or what was previously protected. It also seemed clear to me that houses built in Tunbridge and Malling cannot be solely destined for local people, and in most cases that may not be what happens. In summary, I wish it to be noted my support for the recommendation that we move to consultation under 18B and the conditions or the concerns that I have and other significant reservations. So I apologise for the monologue. I tried to be quick, but this is a very important time for all of us, I really believe. I'm now going to move on to hear from members in the chamber and councillors to hear their comments. I have sorry, Roger, Councillor Taylor.
You're more than welcome, sir. A clarification. Are we deciding tonight to send this document for consultation to the public, or can we scrutinise the contents of this document?
I'll come to Eleanor, but it's my understanding it's the document before you that is offered for agreement tonight, subject to some clauses that we'll come to, which are supplementary to this recommendation, where minor changes can occur. Eleanor.
So we can scrutinise this document this evening? Is that what you're saying?
It's not the intention this evening to go through it line by line, or even case by case or site by site. It's, are we going to take this document in principle to consultation, but you'll hear later on how minor amendments may be considered by the head of planning. Is that correct, Eleanor?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd agree with what you said in principle. Obviously, if members have any questions that they want to raise this evening, we're very happy to discuss them. And some of them might be ones that we need to get back to you on the detail of, Councillor Dalton, which we can certainly do before the consultation. And as Councillor King has alluded to, the recommendations following the main recommendation at 3.2 are just around ensuring that we've got the ability, should the committee recommend this to Cabinet for approval this evening, to make any minor changes that are required before the consultation formally commences on the 10th of November. Thank you.
Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Chair. I agree, we do need to get this out for consultation, which is where our main arguments will be coming from with the public, that we can come back and then scrutinise it. There is something I would like to see in there before it goes out to consultation. I'd like to see the numbers, the 6,000, put against the settlements so that people know what is in the pipeline that's already been agreed that is included in this plan, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hood.
Thank you very much, Chair. If I can pick up on a couple of points. Firstly, I'd like to start by acknowledging the extremely hard technical work that officers have put into putting this enormous document and the highly complex supporting evidence base that we've got here, and for taking on the let's be frank about it, the impossible task of trying to accommodate 20,000 homes into a borough that's got 71% greenbelt. The Labour government have saddled the government have saddled the borough with this impossible situation. That 29% increase in our housing target is frankly ludicrous, but you've made the point very well. The imposition of the grey belt designation, which we've relied on in the past to help us with our planning policies, our planning decisions that the area planning committees has gone. We've seen that. We saw that at our last area planning committee for Area 1. Can I ask? We've got the map within the document, but can we have a larger map of all of these sites? So every settlement site, can we have a bigger? Is it possible to have? Because it's very difficult for residents to actually see in detail where the edges of some of these sites are. So that would be really helpful. And I just want to pick up on the bit on the basically page 354 onwards. We're relating to sustainable transport, and I think this comes to the crux of the dilemma we've got, is that there's a change in policy by Kent County Council, which has been adopted by the borough in the local plan. So anyone would support the principle that the effects of development should be mitigated by modifications to the transport system. We have the reality that we have a series of ancient towns and villages here, and they've got pinch points all over the place. We've got limited scope to increase the space for additional vehicles, which will be inevitable if we do not compensate by massively improving the availability and affordability of things like buses, and to instill a fundamentally improved attitude to actually people wanting to hop onto a bus rather than stepping out of their front doors and into a car. I applaud the fact that there's a refocusing of the future provision on sustainable transport, but relying solely on this new vision-led approach rather than the predict and provide approach which KCC have previously used will actually simply avoid KCC having the responsibility to be realistic, because at some point some of these sites they're going to have to actually look at it and say, doesn't matter how many cycle routes you put in there, doesn't matter if you put a footpath in there, the impact is going to be severe. And I'm thinking of sites like you've got sites like Hadlow where there is no cycle provision, there's no alternatives. You've got the North Tunbridge site particularly jumps out. Where is the mitigation? There's no plans for cycle routes there. We've been lobbying hard for them, and they're not in the active travel plan. So it's a matter of having realism, and I don't think I've been talking about this for quite a while. That in many cases the cumulative effect of these developments will be indeed severe, and the county council, and this council have to be honest. We need to balance realism from our officers about the capacity of our roads to accommodate things like bus lanes when actually that provision fails to offer any meaningful support. And similarly with walking, wheeling and cycling infrastructure, we all want to be able to have alternatives to cars, but in order to remove cars from the commute, everybody wants to see less cars on their way to work or on their way to get their shopping. But common sense tells us there's only a finite number of people who are going to be able to do that. And this really worries me. The sustainable transport policy really concerns me, that it's not realistic. We are not, if we accept that actually looking for modal shift purely is going to resolve this, we're in a fantasy world.
Thank you, Councillor Hood, on everything you've said. On the first point, I've had an indication from James Bailey that we can provide a large-scale map of all the sites, and I guess that'll be to all members, yes?
We're actually going to be producing a policies map alongside the local plan. So at the moment, we've provided a policies map, which is digital version, so you can actually see the sites online currently, all the detail where they are. But we will also have a policies map, which will be a PDF version, which you'll be able to kind of blow up and see in detail. And that will go alongside the local plan when it goes out to consultation.
I think Councillor Hood's generic point was about sustainable travel, but not only that, about how we're going to manage the relationship with consultees like KCC. So who will answer that? Is that Bart or?
I mean, in terms of its regulation is an ongoing process. It's the start of the process. So when we go through regulation 18 to 19, there's a lot more detailed transport modelling that we need to engage with. In terms of our statutory consultees, not just KCC, it's National Highways that we need to engage with as well. And that will all be factored into and all be filtered into our IDP as we develop the ID, because the IDP is an iterative process that will be constantly developing to make sure there's an up-to-date evidence base going forward. So that's, as I said, this is the start of the process. What you've got in front of you, the evidence base is the start. There's a lot more evidence that we need to gather, especially around transport and transport modelling, which we will be conducting assuming if members go out to consultation on this document, that process will start pretty quickly once we started to gather the feedback. Chairman, I just wanted to clarify one point from Councillor Palmer in terms of that the figure that was referred to, which I think you're talking about the extant permissions.
Through you, Chair. The ones that are like already in the pipeline, because this plan starts last year. And I know that Platt are down here for having 15 additional houses. Well, I know there's about 40 of them already in the pipeline. So I don't think it gives a fair indication to the residents as to exactly how much is going to be in there.
Answer that. What we wouldn't want to do is replicate information that's already in the public domain as part of this process, because what we produce every year is an AMR, an annual monitoring report, and within that contains our extant permissions. So we've got an AMR that was produced last year, and we're about to come back to H&P on the 2nd of December with an updated version, and that will contain all our extant planning permissions that have been granted during that period of time. So that information is and will be in the public domain already as part of a statutory requirement that we are required to produce. So that information will be there and currently is partly available already because we've already published last year's AMR and we're about to publish the next version coming up.
Could I come back, Chair, please? Okay.
You're going to come to Eleanor first because it may cover the point you're asking.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Palmer. Everything James says is entirely correct. However, I think from the brief conversation we had prior to the meeting, this is more about information that is easily accessible for people during the consultation period. So whilst we won't reflect those into the table that's in the plan that explains the allocations, we can make sure that we provide some information as part of FAQs, etc., that explains that information so that people aren't having to go back to the AMR for another source of information. So in terms of the consultation, FAQs, we can lay it out alongside the proposed allocations. That's absolutely fine. But we can also link to the AMR for anyone who's interested in the more detailed and technical exercise.
I have Councillor Bell.
Yes, it was just a query really about when the consultation closes, which is Monday the 22nd of December. And I just feel with Christmas and New Year, I feel we should be delayed until maybe Friday the 2nd of January. And I would actually recommend that. just to give us a little bit more time if anyone's in agreement.
So that's a firm proposal, yes?
Yeah. Proposal.
Councillor Dalton.
Thank you for allowing me to come back on that one, Sue. But I do have concerns with the timing. And I do agree that we need to get this consultation out. But number one, if the consultation finishes on the 22nd of the 12th, 25, we then will the officers be even looking at the results prior to 25/12 because it's the Christmas period? We then have the Christmas period and of course the New Year period. Can we be assured that if members have questions during the above period, we as members can obtain answers? I suspect the answer is no. Therefore, I think in extending until the 9th of the 1st would be a good way forward so that members can ask and obtain answers. And 5, we must not fall into the trap that we suffered with the last local plan submission. So, you know, the officers are not coming back till the 4th of January. After the holiday period, they're not here. For an example, I've had to speak to 2 officers today on another subject. Both of them are on holiday until Monday. So the question is, will the holiday period and finishing on the 2nd of January, and the officers are not coming back until the Monday, the 5th of January?
Thank you. Eleanor.
Thank you, Chair. We entirely understand where members are coming from on that additional period, and I would have no problem with an extension to the 2nd of January so that when everybody is likely to be back in the office on that Monday, we can then pick this up at full pace, given the very, very tight timetable we have between the end of this consultation and needing to present a Regulation 19 plan back to members at council. I can't say for sure, Councillor Dalton, which of the officers in the team are working. Some will be between Christmas and New Year. It does happen. There will be a mix of different arrangements. I think that you raise a very good point about how officers or how anyone might be contactable during that period should we extend the consultation. So I will take that away if I can, and just have a think through with the team about who might be around, who more widely in the council's wider team that supports on this sort of work might be around, so that if there were any questions about responding to the consultation in that period, we could do our best, bearing in mind that everyone deserves a break over the festive period and there are bank holidays, to ensure that we can respond to any member queries at the end of that period. But as I say, the 2nd of January, I understand where members are coming from entirely, and I think we could accommodate that, albeit any later than that, and I would have to raise a significant risk with members about the timetable for the remainder of the local plan work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a proposition from Councillor Bell to extend the date by 2 weeks, and I'm happy to second that. Is there anyone that wishes to speak on that subject before we consider if we ratify that? Councillor Thornewell.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's a good idea. I've no problem with it. But I'm going to say here and now that last time we submitted the plan, not all the documents arrived with the planning inspectorate by the due date. And they were asking for documents to be sent in afterwards, which was not a good start. And therefore, I think it's very important indeed, in fact, 100% important, that when we lodge the plan, all the documents are lodged in time, and it's not a few days in advance of the date. I would think you'd need a fortnight. And if that means we have to, I don't know, put more resources into it, that's what we would do. I mean, when I worked at a solicitor's office, we never ever left things to the last moment, because if you got it wrong in some way, the claim could be out of time, you get sued. And That's what happened here. He didn't get sued, but the documents were not all lodged in time.
Thank you. There is a precedent. I mean, thank you for your support and the opening support. I think there is a precedent in the sense we did extend it by 2 weeks previously in the previous version of Regulation 18. But I think your concerns will probably be more pertinent to Regulation 19 and beyond when we. No, I understand that, but I guess here what we're trying to do is decide how we're going to proceed with this Regulation 18. Do any of the officers want to say anything? No? Right, thank you. So unless anyone else wants to say anything, we have a proposition from Councillor Bill. Councillor Bridge, did I ever miss you?
Sorry, Chair, I don't want to extend the evening more than I need to. Just a couple of points, if I may. Picking up first of all on one of your comments on housing for local people. I mean, I appreciate that we need housing for all types of people and a wide housing mix, and people will move into the borough from various places. But bearing in mind the cost of housing in the open market in this borough, I think the last I heard, it's 10 times the average house price is 10 times the average salary, and I think in Tunbridge it's even higher than that. We need to make sure there's provision for local people who can't afford those sorts of prices. So I was pleased to see in this document the amount of affordable housing we'll be asking for. And I was particularly pleased to see that of that affordable housing allocation, 50% of it will be social housing, if I understood it correctly. I just hope that we don't let developers wriggle out of that obligation on the grounds of viability. We see that again and again. So I think it's important that we do push that and make sure that we do get that element of affordable housing. And the second point, if I may, picking up on Councillor Hood's points about infrastructure, what I don't get a clear picture of from this draft plan is how we can ensure some of this infrastructure is provided. I'm just taking, for example, the potential housing allocation to the north of Tunbridge. You know, that's a sizable site of 1,600 homes potentially. And we're talking about homes that will be 2.5 to 3 miles.
Point of order.
What's the point of order, Councillor Davis?
We have a substantive motion on the timing. We should be discussing the housing, which is relevant later on, and those comments from my colleague should come at that time and not when we're considering this motion.
Thank you. I was being indulgent because I think it is a good point, and the points you're making are valid. But I'd like to take it this way: are there any of the points that you want to make, and even any of the other outstanding speakers like Councillor Hickman and Councillor Davis, relevant to the change of date? Because I'd like to get that out of the way before we.
Apologies, I didn't realise. I thought you were opening it up to a general.
No, I was trying to move forward on the date issue, and then I'll come back to you first. Okay. So unless there are any other points on the motion that we have to move the date to the 2nd of January, I'd like to go to a vote. Now, is anyone objects to doing that by general affirmation? So I'd like if you could just say it again, please. Thank you. Right, Councillor Bridge, back to you.
Yes, thank you. Apologies for disrupting the flow of the discussion. I was talking about the potential allocation to the north of Tunbridge. We're talking about houses that will be 2.5 to 3 miles out of the town centre. So we will need bus services to link that area, those houses, to the town centre. How do we get those bus services when it's a commercial decision, surely, for the local bus companies who may not see that as attractive? And also medical provision. We've only got, I think, 3 GP practices in the town, 2 of which are in the town centre. There's only one to the north of the town, and that's not easily accessible from where these houses will be. So how do we ensure we get medical provision in the north of the town that will be accessible to people living here? From my observation in recent months, getting medical provision isn't very easy. And even if you do get a building site, you need to populate it with trained staff, of course, and they're not always readily available. And also there'll be some distance from any shops. So how do we ensure there is retail provision in that part of the town as well? Thank you.
I think those are valid questions, and I think they compound what Councillor Hood has already said. I don't know if the officers have got anything more they want to add.
I mean, as part of the engagement with our statutory providers, we will be having ongoing and have been having ongoing discussions with statutory providers in terms of the ICB, KCC, National Highways. Again, a lot of that is fed into what we call the infrastructure delivery plan, and you've got a version of that in your evidence base. As I said, that is a continually evolving evidence base that we continually update to make sure that we're fully aware of what is needed to or required from the statutory providers, so we can link that in with applications, and that's public. So obviously members of the public can see what is required for infrastructure delivery. So it is something that we're having ongoing discussions both and have been leading up to this point, and will carry on to do so with our statutory providers to make sure that we update that document going forward. So that's a sort of an ongoing iterative process. I can assure you continues and is ongoing.
Thank you. Councillor Hickman.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just to say I'm happy for the consultation to go ahead. I'm also happy to hear from our residents to hear what they've got to say about this. I don't intend to, rewrite the plan this evening because it's not the time. But I will reserve my right not to support something if I don't feel I want to. So yes to the consultation, but the way I'm going to vote when it comes back might change, don't know.
Noted, thank you. Councillor Davis, did you want to speak?
Near this point, there's been some very useful points made, but I think in the frequently asked questions going out, it is important to draw people's attention to the most important ones. I would include the infrastructure development plan as exactly one of those that people need to be aware of and be prepared to comment on. If our questions don't target that, then I think people will not do it, will not respond as they should. It is both Councillor Hood and Councillor Bridge have raised very, very valid points about the infrastructure development plan. We tend to focus on the housing, and that development plan is absolutely critical for getting workable communities.
Thank you. Do you do either of the officers feel that they're in a position to explain the nature of the response that we will be asking residents to make? Will it be questionnaire based? Will it be multi-choice? I don't know. Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll provide a number of questions for consultees to respond to. Those questions will work through the document. So as people read the document, there'll be a number of questions there for people to comment on. There will also be a question as part of the consultation, which will consider other information provided. So, for example, the infrastructure delivery plan, the sustainability appraisal, the habitats regulations assessment, for example. So there will be an opportunity to comment on those documents.
Councillor Dalton.
Thank you once again. Could I refer to chapter 5, 519, the overall housing need? It said to deliver approximately 647 affordable housing per annum. Then there's a note below that states, please note that it is not possible to deliver the level of affordable housing on an annual basis. Therefore, this figure is provided as a guide to show our exceptional affording housing needs. And then if I also on chapter 5, 5.26, it states that our minimum housing need of 19,746 dwellings within this period if we release significant areas of greenbelt land. We are not at this stage able to demonstrate a buffer to meet that housing need. And same on 5.27. This is outside my ward, it's land at Borough Green. The site has the capacity to deliver around 3,000 dwellings alongside employment, community use and infrastructure. And then it goes on to say, we have identified this site as the potential to deliver around 2,000 dwellings. That's on 5.3. What happens if they can only develop 2,000 houses? And then again, the housing delivery of 2,000 houses on that. And final one is 5.40. In consideration that 71% coverage of the greenbelt within the borough is unable to meet our housing needs without releasing sites within the greenbelt. Can we explain what those sites are, please? Thank you.
Okay. Yep, a number of points to respond to there. So in terms of the affordable housing, so Tunbridge and Malling, we have an affordable housing need, and that affordable housing need is far greater than what we can actually deliver on an annual basis. So, we provide that figure, but obviously our housing need figure is 1,097. But it's not possible to deliver the level of affordable housing by just delivering that amount. If you would like to address affordable housing and deliver those, that 647 per year, you would need to increase your annual delivery of housing, market housing, to then deliver the affordable housing. Hence why we've got that note at the bottom.
I can do. Were in terms of why have we looked at Borough Green Gardens as 2,000 allocation. Obviously, the allocation in terms of site area looks at 3,000 in terms of constraints and deliverability, because we obviously have to project housing across the planned period for our planned period. And we consider that it's not achievable to deliver the full quantum over the planned period. So hence, we've got to be realistic in what we can deliver. So we've set that at a 2,000 level, with the other 1,000 delivered post planned period. So whilst the entire allocation looks at 3,000, we consider that in terms of our housing trajectory, only 2,000 can be delivered in the time frame, with 1,000 earmarked for later development. So in effect, the whole allocation looks at 3, but post delivery. And in terms of paragraph 5.40, in terms of greenbelt, so you have to sort of go down a sort of a selection criteria. You've got to look at all other sites apart from greenbelt sites before you can consider greenbelt sites. So it's kind of going down a selection criteria. We cannot meet our housing need, our objectively assessed housing need, without going into greenbelt. So in effect, what we have to do is look at sites in the green belt that are most suitable for release, and hence that's why we've gone to the grey belt sites. And that's our criteria that we have to follow, because the protection that's still afforded to green belt still stands. We have to go down this sort of criteria-based assessment before we release green belt, and hence that's why we have to do the stage 1 greenbelt assessment, and that's followed on by the stage 2 greenbelt assessment. Hopefully that sort of clearly outlines why we have to go down that sort of phased approach.
Does for me, thank you.
Councillor Tutton, excuse me.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not a member of your board, so thank you for allowing me to speak. I think I've, since I put my hand up, I think I've found the answer to one of the questions, but I'll ask it anyway. In relation to the local green spaces, the topic paper will come out with all the other, and that will cover all of the sites that came forward and which ones you've ruled in and ruled out. Yeah. And the other question was around heritage evidence that's sort of site specific and when that will be available, because that's obviously relevant to a number of sites. I'm particularly interested in that. Thank you.
Yeah, so in terms of the local green space, there will be a topic paper that we'll present on that. And I believe that in the back of the plan, there's kind of a list of sites, I believe. So we've got further work to do on those between Regulation 18 and 19, which we'll look at. And also as part of the consultation, there will be a question. So if we have missed a site that needs to be considered, there will be a question on that as well. In terms of heritage and site specific, we've been working with our consultants to look at specific sites in terms of heritage, and there will be a paper released quite shortly on that as well. That's kind of in the inbox, ready to be progressed very shortly. So,
Thank you, Councillor Palmer.
For means of total clarity to my residents, on page 47, the figure 5.2, could we please put in brackets or with a footnote or something like that, the figure of 3,000 next to the 2,050? So that although it's not going to be within this plan, it's totally clear that that's what we're talking about for that site. So footnotes or...
Yeah, I will say we have added a footnote of a similar nature elsewhere in the plan, but I will say that we've missed that, and that's going to be within the consultation version that we take forward. So
thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Thornywell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I have to say that I agreed with many of your opening remarks about the process we're being forced into. If I can just be permitted to make some general remarks, I think it's very disappointing that a Labour government comes here trying to water down planning policies which the post-war Labour government brought into force. It was the post-war Labour government that brought into force the Greenbelt, and it was also that they who set up the procedure to designate national parks and also areas of outstanding natural beauty. And it now appears from their rhetoric that they regard all these things and heritage and so forth as red tape. They often refer to red tape. And the Prime Minister himself seems to be obsessed about some bat tunnel on HS2. And I think it's spiders up at Dartford. But he refers to these things as if they're an opposition to the government in some way. And now, of course, just to put it on record, they are in the House of Lords fiddling about with clauses concerning what they've now termed national landscapes, which to my mind watered down the protection that designation gave. And although they backtracked, they're still proposing to water it down to some extent. And of course, the statements in the press recently that they're rowing back on the idea of affordable housing, particularly in London, because they think that the figures for London are not good enough. And the development industry seems to be allowing the idea to spread that we can't have affordable housing, and the maximum it has to be is 25%. And the Labour government doesn't seem to want to provide social housing as different from affordable housing. So having said all that, and just lastly, I think their 1.5 million houses across the whole country is a pipe dream. They won't achieve it, whatever they do fiddling about with things. And I don't agree with their ideas of growth. And they won't produce growth to satisfy some budgetary things in time for the next few budgets while they're in office. But having said all that, I agree that we must get on with this local plan, and it must go out to consultation as it stands. And and then we'd deal and see what people have to say. But it is a very tight timescale. So we really need to get on with it. And a minor point, my parish clerk has noticed that in the plan there's reference to K Sports in Dittner's owning Cobdown, which is obviously incorrect. And also there's a map which appears to show Larkfield Football Club owning our playing field. Is there a mechanism for us to report these factual errors? How can we deal with that, please?
What is the mechanism, other than the fact that Eleanor, I will come to that in a minute, how those amendments will be agreed, but what is the mechanism?
I think I'm not sure whether is it actually within this plan that those references are made, or is it within the evidence base? Within the evidence base. So in terms of the open space study and the playing pitch strategy, etc., those were undertaken at a point in time. They were undertaken by our consultants. We do indeed need to review those reports, which is a requirement in terms of kind of Sport England guidance, and we will be doing that in December, January time. So if there are any points in those reports that we need to update, we have that opportunity then. But in terms of the evidence base as it is, that is currently a published evidence base, and apologies if there is a mistake in there, but we will rectify it when we update that Stage E report.
In order to let you know where
no, thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairman.
I've got Councillor Taylor first and then Councillor Round.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm not a member of
and then Councillor Banks.
Councillor Dean sent some questions round earlier on this evening, and whilst most of them could be dealt with during a consultation period, there were two I think I'd like some clarification on. The maps produced in the plan, the copyright of them, will parishes and local members be able to produce copies of those maps without infringing copyright? And when does this developing plan start to have planning weight? Thank you.
The latter first, and then Kelly will do with the copyright matter. In terms of the weight, the plan will carry no weight as we move forward. It will start to carry a degree of weight as we move into Reg 19, depending on the level of objections to the relevant policies that are there. But DM officers will not apply any weight to the plan, but the evidence base that's on the website is the latest up-to-date web evidence base, and that is a material planning consideration. So that will be taken into account by DM officers in decision taking because it's the latest evidence base that's published on the council's website. Hopefully that answers that, and I'll hand over to Kelly for the maps.
I think the maps that we produce will have, depending on which map, will have copyright on it. And I think potentially I need to understand what maps you're referring to answer the question. But obviously these will be public documents, so you will be able to print them if you wish to. But we can look into the particulars, I think, just with a bit of extra understanding. That's okay.
We are here to assist, and we want to assist in terms of the parishes to get the most out that we can out of the consultation. So, it's a question of just asking, and we will assist where we possibly can on that.
Councillor Round.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of possibly minor points. I'm anticipating phone calls from residents saying, what does this mean? Can we ensure that the consultation goes out is not too technical for them? We had a consultation some time ago where people kept ringing up, so I don't know what that means. I don't understand that. Can it be produced with non-technical terms, the residents? That's one. And secondly, on page 47, I noticed there's a settlement called East Malling and Mill Street. Where the hell's Mill Street? It's a road in East Malling. It's not a settlement at all. It's East Malling, Mill Street, East Malling. I'm going to get a call on that, I'm sure.
Okay, we'll just note that point for the minute. I'll come to Councillor Banks and we'll pick them up together. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not a member of your committee, so thank you for allowing me to speak. I'd like to, I think, reinforce what many other members have said this evening regarding the importance of infrastructure. really infrastructure delivery. And I suppose the other term that's come up really is statutory consultation. I suppose the word effective statutory consultation comes to mind. And I was thinking particularly of something that I'm working on with Councillor Dean. She's not here tonight, but she may speak online, I'm not sure. And that is regarding primary care. Primary care has always been a matter which actually involves statutory consultation. And when you actually look at the past as to where we were, where we are in the present, and maybe where we'll be in the future, I think the whole thing is when you look at Kent and Medway, we've got some of the lowest ratios of patient to GP in the country. And so I think the whole thing is one of the things that comes up with my conversations with residents, and so will surely come up in this consultation, is are we going to be able to effectively deliver primary care with the expanded houses across the borough? Now, looking at what's happened in the past, what's happening now, I have to say that I don't have a great deal of confidence. I would like to see something actually so that we can actually demonstrate a vision where we are going to actually deliver primary care. Because I think it's going to be, nobody wants, I think a lot of residents are going to push back on housing. But I think the whole thing is, surely, if we can actually demonstrate that we are actually going to improve the infrastructure for those residents, it's going to help, and particularly primary care. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Eleanor, could you address those concerns?
Yes, thank you. I'll deal with Councillor Banks's point, and then I want to come back on what Councillor Roud raised earlier. Councillor Banks, you know, you and I have had this conversation on a number of occasions, and I think you and I, along with many members and officers, share a deep sense of frustration about this. The system is really complex in terms of delivering health of any kind, primary care being no exception to that. And the function of the planning system is to secure those contributions and potentially through development management to secure the relevant planning permissions. It's not the role of the planning system, unfortunately, to also deliver on those aspirations. That is the role of the relevant healthcare commissioning body. So in the case of Kent and Medway, it's the Kent and Medway ICB, I believe at the moment. The acronym changes very frequently. But what we try really hard to do is work with those infrastructure providers, and in this case the ICB, to probably go a bit further down the journey than would be standard for a planning authority, and really try and have those detailed conversations with them about what the blockers might be, how can we bring stakeholders together. Our leader and our cabinet member for infrastructure are involved in several of those discussions, both on a borough-wide level and individual schemes. And we've got officers who've been involved in them from a number of different perspectives. So we're doing everything we can to use the levers that we've got, and to show that we can put delivery in place. I think it is a really important point, though, as part of moving towards Reg 19, that we do as much as we can to demonstrate how provision will be put in place and at what point it can be put in place as well, and to be realistic about those expectations. It's very unlikely that in a new development you would get healthcare infrastructure up front. And I think, again, we need to be honest about the fact that that is the current delivery approach. But I can guarantee you we will do everything we can to ensure that currently held contributions are being utilised so that we can demonstrate deliverability, and hopefully give people some confidence that it is possible. Incredibly complicated, very frustrating and long-winded, but possible, hopefully, in the end.
James, Councillor Roud's point.
Yeah, you asked for non-technical jargon. It's difficult for planners to actually say that in context, but I can assure you in this time, you know, we've got the FAQs are obviously take account of that, and a lot of them go through John Steele to make sure that they are specifically designed that people can understand, and they're easy to read and they're easy to understand on that basis. So we have gone through that element, and also reading the plan. You've got many audiences with that plan. You've got local residents, you've got developers, you've got agents. So we're trying to go out to lots of different audiences, but we are, when we're asking the questions, when we go through our consultation platform, we are trying to make those questions very easy to understand, so people who are going to read them can really input in terms of have their say in terms of the local plan. So we have thought about that in kind of quite a lot of detail, make sure it's going through the right people.
Eleanor.
Also, just to add, Councillor Roud, there is a really detailed glossary document as part of the pack of information, which does try to explain the myriad of complex planning terms that end up having to be used in more accessible language. It's the sort of thing, you know, again, if there's any member queries about that, please do let us know if we can do anything to help with any of those. But it is quite a detailed document, and hopefully, therefore, if it's particularly about terminology that you're getting questions, there's a specific place that you can point people to in order to help with that.
Councillor Hood.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I've just just picking up on what Councillor Banks has been saying about the ICB. I do think the council needs to be mindful of facilitating a concentration of medical provision in the south of Tunbridge, when we can see that there is going to be a massive demand for that for medical facilities in the north, and I include Adelaide as well. I just want to ask a question. I know that the cabinet member might have palpitations if I mention the words Homes England because of their previous connection with Borough Green Gardens. However, Councillor Bridge made an extremely valid point earlier about the council's provision of social housing, and that was also picked up by Councillor Dalton. I've recently become aware that Stevenage Borough Council has managed to get its hands on £24 million worth of funding, which is allocated specifically to providing social and independent housing. I just wonder if I can have some kind of comment about whether what we're doing, whether the council's talking to Homes England about that, because I'd be fascinated to know if there's any of that kind of work going on in the background. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes. So that's slightly outside of the purview, I would say, of the local plan. So happy maybe to have a more detailed conversation outside of the meeting, Councillor Hood. But boroughs like Stevenage, who have a council homes building programme and have a housing revenue account, and therefore have the ability to deliver in that way and are set up in that way, are therefore able to access grant in a different way to a borough like ours, which does not have a housing revenue account and is not currently in the business of building council housing. That does not mean that we do not have regular conversations with Homes England about any possible levers we can pull, even if it's not levers for development ourselves, but helping registered providers look for additionality on sites. We've supported some RPs through that process, and other conversations with them about what their next round of affordable housing programme will look like, and whether there are any opportunities for us individually, or indeed working with partner authorities in the West Kent area around those kind of things. So we keep all of those conversations open every time they've got a different funding programme, or when they make announcements, as they often do, to say this funding programme is underspent, so we're changing the criteria. We do always make sure that we're engaging with them, but at the moment, Tunbridge and Morling is not set up to deliver council housing directly, and therefore we wouldn't be eligible for that sort of grant that Stevenage was able to access.
Thank you for allowing me to come back, Chairman. It does seem that we have managed to disable ourselves by not having our own property company, arm's length property company, in this respect. I just wonder how, if you're talking about other providers, is it possible that we could leverage some of that funding to come in by working with other registered housing providers within the West Kent Partnership, for instance?
I mean, the art of the possible in terms of delivering social housing is pretty wide, but just to be clear, an arm's length housing company wouldn't necessarily be the vehicle through which to do that. It would depend on the purpose for which it is set up for, again, which can be very, very wide. We will continue to look at all of those avenues. I think possibly also we might get through a whole meeting without mentioning it, but I am going to use the dreaded phrase of local government reorganisation and say that potentially opens up a whole different world of opportunities in the lead up to that, as well as once it's happened in whatever format it might happen. So we will continue with all of those discussions and we will keep the committee updated.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Dean online.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not a member of your committee, so thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm grateful to those members who've actually taken up some of my questions, and I understand Mr. Taylor's comment about dealing with them through the consultation. But now these papers are actually in the public domain, could I just ask the two big clarifications on two of the strategic sites? First of all, could we have some clarity about the proposed, what was proposed at one stage of a spine road from Bradbourne Village to New Road, East Malling, because it doesn't figure in any of the plans. And secondly, because we have clarification of what the internal traffic movement is going to be between Broadwater, or north of Kings Hill as it's sometimes called, into the established Kings Hill community, because that is quite crucial to the flow of transport locally. Can I finish by saying that my many congratulations to the officers for producing such a document. It's an impressive piece of work and streets ahead of the former draft work, if I may say so, in terms of being user friendly. But can I wave one flag? I think a number of members have talked about the difference between proposing things and being able to deliver them. And I do think sometimes in these documents we use the word ensure when actually we don't have any ability to ensure, as Mr. Bailey said just in his last comments. We can work as hard as we can to try and ensure, but in many of these cases we can't ensure. And I think therefore we need to be very careful about the wording of the documents to make it very clear to residents when we can actually deliver and when we're actually just one of the players in the process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. I see that James has noted that your question about two particular sites. I just want to make a general point. I hope this isn't going to start a trend to go down a site-by-site discussion, because we will be here for a week. So that isn't the intention, but James has indicated he is happy to respond. So we'll go that. Are you happy to do that, James? Right, thank you.
Response will be simple on the basis that in terms of you've got a detailed on Bradbourne, you've got a detailed planning application in front of you, or that's currently being assessed through the council, whereas this is a proposed allocation. So this is just going out to Reg 18. So there's a lot more detail in the planning application, and I think it's probably best just to leave it on that stage, because these are the sites that have been put forward under the call for sites and have been through the evidence-based assessment. With regard to the informal traffic movement into Kings Hill, again, this is just the Regulation 18 consultation. As we move through to Reg 19, there'll be further work, further detailed assessment, site-specific policies for our major strategic sites, and there'll be a lot more detail that we put into those site-specific policies that will look at particular issues that the evidence base shows we need to come forward. That could deal with access, that could deal with where you place buildings, it could deal with landscaping, particular areas you want to protect. So that is, again, a detailed for Regulation 19 as we move forward, but not for the Regulation 18. So hopefully that addresses Councillor Dean's question in a simplistic form, because as I said, we weren't going to go into detail on specific application.
Thank you. Councillor Crisp.
Yeah, thanks for letting me speak. Just a point about sort of infrastructure and how it would possibly be delivered based on, I think, the crazy housing figures that the government have put forward. If you take the analogy that came up recently, that 60 houses creates another 100,000 vehicle journeys a year. Based on 19,000 houses, that works out 32 million extra vehicle journeys a year. And I'm probably out with that, but that's figures that came out a few weeks ago. How on earth will, with the houses being built, how will roads cope with that, and sort of what's the plan for that rather than just building houses?
Yeah, we, we work in collaboration with KCC, and we work with consultants, Jacobs, who undertake modelling, and models have been created to cover the whole of Kent. So each local authority, if they wish to, are able to plug in, kind of future growth and projections, etc. And those models take account of those projections, and they tell us, how many additional movements a development will see an increase in car movements on the road. So we've done that, and we've undertaken that work currently, as a worst case scenario. And as we move forward, we'll continue to progress that work to align that with the plan. So we will have an understanding of those traffic movements, and it looks at AM and PM peaks and things like that. So we'll understand where the issues are, we'll understand what the problems are, and then we'll work to mitigate those impacts, in however that may look, whether that's junction improvements, whether it's modal shift in terms of transport and in public buses, etc. So we look at that, and we look at it in detail.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I just wanted to point out why I think active travel is actually so important when you look at those kind of
Hang on, it's not a discussion. I'll give you a brief response, but carry on quickly.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
It appears to me, unless I've got it wrong, that we've addressed all the requests for questions or statements in the room, and I don't see any more hands online. But before, at least I didn't. Councillor Hood.
Thank you for indulging me. I just got a question about that very last point that was raised with the modelling. Does that modelling take into account very fine detail? So, if you've got a site, which I've got a site in mind, where there is an inability of the developments that we have seen listed here to provide a school, provide a primary school. Every child who lives on one of these quite a large development is going to have to travel across the town to get to the primary school. Is that kind of fine detail with those additional essential movements to the other end of the town or across the town? Are we able to factor that level of detail in?
I think, Bart's just assisted me there with the answer. And actually, in terms of primary schools, the catchments are a lot smaller than needing to travel all the way across town potentially. So in terms of the modelling, does it look at primary schools and different uses? I would need to go back and ask them in terms of what's included. But they consider kind of traffic movements, and they model those and it's predictive uses. So if you've got a development there, they understand in terms of kind of the travel movements of people generally, and so that's what they put within the model.
Just to follow up on that, because Kelly's entirely correct about the way that model works. Councillor Hood, we all know which part of the borough you're talking about. And the travel patterns to primary schools in that part of the district are different to most village primary schools because it is a large town centre. I think this is one of the it's a really good example of an issue that's specific to a particular part of the borough that we should consider how we pick up between 18 and 19 around not necessarily even site specific, but area specific considerations that we can absolutely look at, because that is a particular set of circumstances because of the way school provision in South Tunbridge has developed over the last period. So you wouldn't expect the model to necessarily pick up on that nuance, but we can layer that local knowledge onto those kind of exercises.
Councillor Dordon.
I promise this will be my last question. On viability, we've got 10.38, 10.39. Can you explain where as on-site delivery is not viable, applicants must submit robust viability evidence? and the cost will be borne by the applicant. In such cases, committed sums or service plots will be required in lieu of the on-site provision. Can you explain that in plain English, please?
Essentially, in terms of local plan viability is an accepted factor in development management, where abnormal costs are excessive. It could be contamination, could be archaeology, could be a whole multitude of other things. And then a developer will submit a viability appraisal, which will be checked by our consultants, and that normally looks at effectively lowering the contributions because of the abnormal costs. So it's a factor that occurs in lots of development management applications, and it's something that we have to look at. So what we have is a cascade approach. So if we're going to go into that viability and they're going to hit, it might hit affordable housing. Unfortunately, that's normally the target area that it hits, because there's still infrastructure provision needed and required for delivery, but it's normally an affordable housing element. So then we kind of look at a cascade approach of, you know, how are we going to then look at if it's a lowering number of the affordable housing figure? Is it an on-site provision? Can they look at an alternative? Do they have land elsewhere? We can look at an off-site provision. Is it an option that we can actually then, is it financial contribution, which is the sort of the last one run on the ladder? But, you know, so we have to be quite adaptable in terms of how we're going to apply the viability and what suits our sort of housing need. And that's why we liaise with our housing colleagues to make sure, you know, for each site, we get what is suitable for the borough and not suitable for the developer, or accepting the fact that viability is a recognised practice and procedure.
Sorry, if I can just come back, you haven't really answered the question of the service plots. We've gone through the list, viability, houses, etc., but then you've got this, and I've never seen it before, a service plot on the site. Does that mean we, TMBC planners, can say to Joe Bloggs builders, right, okay, we accept the viability, but if you service 3 plots, we can bring that down. Is that correct?
Just going to come back with an answer, Chairman, if that's all right.
Thank you. Does anyone think that prevents us? I mean, we'll come back on that, because does anyone think that that prevents us going to a vote on this aspect of the recommendation? Right. So what I'd like to remind you is that at 3.2 in your pack, this aspect of the recommendation is seeking approval for the Tunbridge and Malling Regulation 18 local plan consultation document, interim sustainability appraisal and draft active strategy plan for an 8-week public consultation between Monday the 10th of November and the 2nd of January 2026. So what I'd like to do is do a roll call on that, please, Victoria.
Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Could you add in the alterations we've just discussed as well, please? The addition of the brackets for the 3,000. There are some additions and small alterations that have been discussed.
Well, that was accepted as an individual item outside the approval. So I think we accept that that will be done.
Okay, it doesn't have to be in the...
taken that on board, so it's not embraced within the actual recommendation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Victoria, thank you.
Councillor Bell.
Oh.
Councillor Bridge.
Approve.
Councillor Dalton.
Reluctantly agree.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Hickmott.
Agreed.
Councillor Hood.
For.
Oliver. Councillor Palmer.
Agree.
Councillor Roud.
Aye.
Councillor Tanner.
For.
Councillor Thornywell.
For.
Councillor Williams.
For.
Councillor King.
Based on the reservations I expressed earlier, 4.
It's unanimous.
Thank you. I'd like to refer you to item 3, the approval sub item 3.3 and 3.4, which we're going to take together, and I'll explain because they relate to approval of delegated authority for the Director of Planning, Housing and Environmental Health to take minor changes to the Tunbridge and Malling Regulation 18 local plan document prior to consultation. That has been slightly amended, that it will not just be the director, but also the cabinet member for planning. So that will be a twosome in terms of any changes that take place. And the same applies to 3.4, which to approve delegated authority for the Director of Planning, Housing, Environmental Health and the cabinet member for planning to make minor changes to other supporting documentation shared with members to date prior to consultation. Does anyone wish for that to be elaborated, or is it self-explanatory? Right, so can I ask for a general affirmation, please? Thank you. 3.5 is to approve delegated authority for the Director of Planning, Housing and Environmental Health to agree other supporting material to be produced for consultation, including a number of topic papers. This would be in consultation with the Leader of the Council and Cabinet Member for Planning. Do you wish to elaborate at all, Eleanor? No, I think, again, it's self-explanatory. Can I ask for your general approval? Thank you. And the final element, which is 3.6, to ask for your approval of the amended local development scheme dated October 2025. Can I ask for general affirmation? Thank you. Pleased to hear we're going on to item 7, which is the work programme. I haven't had any requests other than one for the addition to the work programme, and we will be discussing that at the next H&P. But I'd like, do you have detail of that, Victoria, or shall I ask Councillor Taylor to give us details? I think I'll do the latter. Could you, Councillor Taylor, could you tell us what you're asking to be included within the work programme?
Yes, at some point in time, a discussion amongst members to perhaps alter the constitution to put the power to set planning committee agenda back in the hands of the chair, and to extend the call-in period for local members to 5 weeks from its current 3 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. We're not voting on the actual correctness. We're voting to discuss that at a forthcoming H&P meeting as a part of the work programme. Is everyone happy with that? Thank you. Right, I have no urgent items. So are you aware of any, Victoria? No. I have no reason to exclude the press and public, so I will close the meeting at 9 o'clock. Thank you.